Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Projector Stories podcast. I am Sarah, a 1-3 emotional projector.
Hey everyone, I'm Laura. I'm a 5-1 splenic projector.
And this is our podcast where we just riff on what is happening with us through a human design lens. We both have right minds, which means we're just seeing what comes out most of the time. And we both have the 1156 channel, which is a channel of curiosity and a channel of storytelling. So you will see all of that come out in each and every episode, in all likelihood. Laura, do you have anything that happened to you this week and or thoughts that happened to you this week, ideas that happened to you this week that you feel like is related to your experiment and deconditioning and the like?
Yes, indeed. It's funny how you course corrected this time. It's not that things happen, but it's that thoughts happen. But this week has been more of a mundane hellhole of a week in terms of events happening. Not necessarily related to deconditioning, but more just being aware of how little energy I have as a projector. So this week our fridge broke down. So cue in the "is your refrigerator running" joke. No, it is not running. It is very sadly not running and causing a lot of issues. And it is amazing how much mental fatigue issues with appliances can create. So I I am the type of person, we talked about this in our like debriefing before we started recording about living with older people and how our generation is adaptable to knowledge and circumstance, that we will figure things out. It's just what we do. Living with older people, like, they're not necessarily able to or willing to do the research, Google things, figure stuff out to be able to problem solve. Um, but this isn't necessarily a generational thing. But anywho, um, my parents were like, "Hey, look at the manual, read the refrigerator manual to see if you can figure out what's wrong with the refrigerator." And they're not going to do it. Well, my mother invited me to do it, so I could not figure out what was wrong with the refrigerator, but it made me think about the times that I was invited to like learn obscure talents and be able to perform them through my years, which was like fixing our KitchenAid mixer. Like, we bake a lot and our mixer broke down and I had to figure out what was wrong with it, which gear stopped malfunctioning, and how to open up the mixer and replace the gear. So if you have your problems with your KitchenAid mixer and it just stops working, feel free to contact me because I'm now an expert in repairing KitchenAid mixers. There's that situation that happened. Like, once our doorknob broke for our front door and my mother was attached to our front door knob, she didn't want to get it replaced. So instead, she's like, with her 3-5 is, let's just open it up and see if we can fix it. And if you didn't know, doorknobs have a lot of internal machinations and mechanics and pieces, and it's not a smart idea just to open up doorknob. And so I had to go into research mode and figure out, how do doorknobs work? Like, what are the mechanisms within a doorknob that allow them to operate a door lock? And I then became a one-day expert in doorknob mechanics and was able to help her. She was doing the work, but I was guiding her and correcting the doorknob issue and figuring out how the pieces got misaligned and how they were supposed to be. And there's like another situation with our food processor where the fuse blew out and I had to figure out how to change a fuse on a circuit board. And like, so many things that I think are partially, if it's partially like generational, like I said, I was telling Sarah, my theory on this is that our generation, we were like at the dawning of the internet boom. The internet existed, but it really expanded when we were young. And if we wanted to watch a movie, you had to figure out how to find that movie for free online on some sketchy website. If you wanted to put music on your like really old school brick-sized iPod, you had to figure out how to download music illegally to put it on your really old school iTunes application on your computer. on your desktop to be able to like have music on your iPod. And so we had to learn all those things and be adaptable with the internet as it grew. And that allows us to be adaptable now with information and be able to problem solve and troubleshoot and figure things out, which results in being projector slaves for other people because they assume we know how to do things and really we're just scrappy. Um, but part of what I wanted to share about this topic and theme, because I'm already rambling, I'll just continue on, is about the material world and money and finances and how, again, part of it is generational, but part of it is people who have monetary resources can hire someone else to do the work. Whereas people who don't have the money to have someone else do the work, they have to figure out how to fix it themselves because they probably don't have the money to replace that whole appliance or item and don't have the money to hire someone to fix it for them. So they're going to do the work in fixing said item. And initially, I thought of this as a projector only issue, but it's not because so many generators, so many people, regardless of their human design type, aren't in a financial state of complete abundance and wealth. There's so many different nuances to prosperity or lack thereof on the material plane that has nothing to do with human design type, though sometimes living your not self life does lead to issues on the material plane or success on the material plane. It's not a one size fits all, but living strategy and authority doesn't equate prosperity on the material plane. In actuality, even though Ra has said that like we're the seven-centered or nine-centered being, Homo sapien and transitus, isn't here for survival. Our consciousness, our minds are not here for survival and for figuring out how to survive mentally. It is an issue with figuring out money and being able to take care of ourselves in this economy, which just has increasing inflation constantly. It's not getting better any day soon. Hopefully it will eventually, but for the time being, it doesn't seem like it's getting any better. But it makes me think of a projector I saw in the Projector Facebook groups, which is our favorite reference point, which is someone who, according to Strategy and Authority, became homeless. They had a home and their strategy and authority took them to a place where it's correct for them to be homeless and to experience that and to struggle in that way. I'm pretty sure they have the 2838, but yeah, strategy and authority doesn't necessarily mean having $1 million in your pocket and being a-okay. It really doesn't, because it's about having the right experiences which give you your correct awareness and your correct perspective as you to fulfill your role in this life, which again isn't necessarily one that is secure. Anywho, that was a bit of a ramble. Part of the root of this ramble to prevent you from speaking even further, Sarah, is just thinking about the frustration I have, or bitterness, I should say, I have as a projector and being reliant on other people for material prosperity. I am not a financially liberated individual. I don't have an income. Anything dealing with money is an immediate cause for stress for me because I don't have money. And so I don't have the ability to, like I said before, outsource. Sarah got a haircut today. I have taught myself how to cut my own hair because I don't have money for haircuts. There's so many things that I've invested my energy into doing because I didn't have material energy as money to be able to do certain things or have certain experiences. And it creates a lot of bitterness for myself, like being in this state. And yet it's where I am, and I'm trying to just be a passenger and observe and be aware of my consciousness that it's as it's living this life without judgment. But yeah, it's a trip. Anywho, Sarah, I'll let you get into whatever it is you want to comment on that tangent.
Yeah. There's a lot there. There really, really is. And yeah, I can, as we were just speaking before this, I can really relate to the having to be scrappy, and also just different generations having different capacities to understand different types of technologies, and just like some people not having the capacity at all to learn new things, right? But, what really kind of pulled me into just thinking and intrigue was you talking about the material plane and the difficulty with it. And what it brought to mind for me was that one, Ross said that human design was for 2027 and beyond. And I often feel like handicapped in this world that we're in, doing what it is that I'm doing, right? Which is trying to decondition and live by strategy and authority. Because, of course, there's ways that I could go out and just make money and do it in a way that doesn't honor my body and my own authority. But I also, as a 1-3, I have to identify or recognize just the fact that, like, this world is so entirely not self that it's almost like the deconditioned life, or the correct life, the life lived by someone who's able to be born and um, know what they are from the start and not have the level of conditioning that the rest of us, like, that is an idealistic place to be. But we're not living in that. We're living in another reality. We're living in the upside down. And it means that, Ra was given this information and he says it often, like, he doesn't know how to decondition people. He has the mechanics for how everything works, ideally, how a human works, ideally, and what happens when they are not living according to themselves, but how to get one that is conditioned into being self was not a handbook that he got from the voice. And so it feels like, despite the fact that not everyone is a 1-3, this whole fucking process is a 1-3 process of deconditioning, because it is an experiment. And we're all supposed to be experimenting with our strategy and authority and trying to understand how to live as correctly as is humanly possible in this collective not self zeitgeist. Like, there's all of these problems that are created by not us that we have to deal with because we are still stuck in essentially our not selves, to the point where we haven't gotten to the place where we're being recognized and having our energy being exchanged, or our insight or guidance being exchanged for energy. And so there's this middle ground, this, I guess you could call it, like a limbo, that we're all in as projectors who have not fully deconditioned, but are not in their not self anymore either. And we're not getting recognized properly, or we haven't learned how to live our lives truly in our own, I guess what you could say, correct lane, in our own, on our own path, on our own very individualized path. And so, like, all of us, I think Cone from the Projectors group made this video. By the way, it's so funny. I've seen Cone all over the place on the Facebook group, and then, like, I heard him talk for the first time. And it's like, with that fifth line that he has, it was almost like I was like, whoa, that's what his voice sounds like. But he had a video where he's talking about um, how there's a specific path that's for you. And when you're living on not self life, like, you're down a totally different path that doesn't have any of the resources, doesn't have any of the um, insights, doesn't have any of the comrades, doesn't have any of the support, the energy, doesn't have any of the things. And you have to find your way back to the right path. And you might have to walk for a while. You have to kind of smell it out. You have to, in this, like, almost blind, deaf, and dumb state, like, crawl towards it. And yeah, I mean, what you were saying just reminded me of that, because it's like there isn't a rule book for how to do this when we're in limbo, how to get towards resources that we can access correctly as ourselves when we are still not fully deconditioned and not fully being recognized and don't have any other way of getting income other than doing things that are what feel like incorrect. And so it's like, how do you make it from one side of, or one street, one path that might be on the other side of town to what is correct for you? And that is a question that's not a statement that I'm going to follow with an answer, because I don't have one. But yeah, that's what everything that you were saying made me think of, Laura.
Well, to riff on what you just said, I feel like I have more questions than answers to based on what you said. It goes back to a theme I think we keep coming back towards, which is um how when if there is no choice, right? If we're just susceptible to the determinism of life, whether we are self or not self, and with our you and me, our undefined G's, and like not a defined sense of direction in life, when you get to the wrong place and you get to the wrong environment and you get to the wrong people, like how do you, like you said, like how do you get course corrected in a way that is correct, that's not through initiation, when no one around you is going to invite you into something correctly because it's the wrong environment for you, especially as an undefined G? And it's a question that has been posted by other people in the Facebook groups. Shout out to Justin, I think his last name is Nunavut. He had this situation where he was living, this is personal versus whatever power for me. So I won't get into too many details because I can sense that it's like the wrong perspective. Anyways, he was sharing his experience, and it was valuable to witness him sharing his experience. Go to the Facebook group, go befriend him if you want to, whatever you want to do. But it was valuable to witness him committing to strategy and authority and to watching what happens without trying to interfere with him being in the wrong place and not receiving the right invitations and waiting to see what's going to happen. Again, it goes back to a previous theme I asked, which is like the theme of like, no one's going to save you. It's that saying that we see in the the self-help community. It really is the not self-help community. What a funny way of putting it. Thanks, Braid. But within the self-help community, we see the saying of like, no one's gonna save you, so you have to do the thing. You have to save yourself. You have to make the first move. You have to do the first thing, and then the universe is gonna follow and catch you and support you. Or you have to make the first move, and then God's gonna come in. Like all this stuff. And as projectors, we're told you have to wait. Like that thing is going to come in if you keep on waiting. And it's very counterintuitive to the rest of the rhetoric that's tossed around. And yeah, it's hard to discern. That's one thing, but we've gone down that rabbit hole. And another thing is like you said, human design is for post 2027. And that scares me. Again, 2027 scares me. It's funny because before this, Sarah and I were talking about Bardo and death, and I'm like, death is fine. Death is great. I love death. But 2027, not so much. Like, can I die before 2027? Let's not manifest that like intentionally, but really, like, please, I don't know if I want to live come 2027. Johannes in the practical, I feel like I just talk about other people. Johannes in the practical human design group, he's one of the admins. He posted something recently about 2027, and I don't remember what it was. I don't know if it was him sharing his feelings or if it was a raw quote or what, but it induced that sense of fear in me again, which is to say, I think it's because as a projector, I'm reliant on the tribe around me for financial resources, and it feels not self, it feels incorrect. And yeah, it is what it is because it helps me survive and it puts a roof over my head. A roof that potentially has mold in it, which is maybe not the healthiest roof, but a roof over my head. It provides security. And it seems scary to just like be thrown out of the little bird nest and like say, okay, fly without wings. Like imagine a little projector baby bird, penguin. Penguins don't fly, and yet like a penguin found itself in like a crow's nest, and the crow mama crow is pushing the little penguin out saying, okay, time for you to fly. penguin can't fly because penguin needs to rely on other people to help it survive. And so the lack of tribal support scares me because I rely on it through my not self to, again, have security. And I don't know what's going to happen in 2027. Maybe it'll be great. Maybe I'll be able to be myself with more ease and I won't need to rely on tribal support. Who knows? But like for my current state, I am not looking forward to it. But that's that's the whole other thing. So we don't have to talk about the boogeyman of 2027.
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be a boogeyman, though. I don't, I'm not going to be the determining factor as to if your fear is not self or self. But um, at the end of the day, like what I've gleaned from my many hours of probably not self open head studying is that 2027 is for projectors. Like, this is when we're actually going to be super useful to the other because there's going to be nothing else holding things together other than our ability to see what, see into the G centers of other people, see into the magnetic monopoles of others, to see where there is harmony to be reached between people who don't have that underlying communal program running anymore. And so I feel like if there was ever a time that you'd be able to have resources correctly, I don't want to say given, but correctly sourced to you because of your ability to guide as a projector, I feel like it's post 2027. I feel like right now is the other interesting thing that Ra talks about is that there's anywhere from 10 to 40 million people who are ready for this information, this human design stuff. Basically, everyone else, which is the other 7.5 to 8 billion people who are never going to ever listen to, come across, absorb human design. And so there's all of these people that are out there that have the capacity to be turned on by human design and its potential for us to be able to live correctly as an awareness and watch our own movie in a graceful manner, that still are yet to be turned on. And they need support too. And so it's like there's these two avenues that I see in 2027 that are actually opening up. And right now I feel like we're in the absolute death throes of the upside down. And I think that the death throes of the upside down are still going to be loud post 2027. I think that obviously the program is going to keep programming. But the communal support that is going away is going to leave a space open for projectors to actually utilize what it is that they're here to do, i.e., guide, in so many more, I guess, capacities and options and potentials. And so I feel ultimately, you don't have to agree with me, of course. You feel however you feel about it, but just as a moment of wanting to maybe be the opposite side of the coin, which is crazy to say that I'm like excited for 2027 for those reasons.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe it's just because I haven't received invitations recently, and so I feel like I'm not fulfilling my purpose as a projector, and I'm stuck in bargains which don't feel great and don't feel freeing. Maybe that's why I'm scared. Maybe it's just because I'm like deep in my not self. Who knows? But yeah, maybe I just need to do more research. And again, that's a good point of like, is this fear a defined fear, a correct fear, or is it a not self fear? I do not know.
Well, I do know that Ross said, this is when it would be really great of me if I started writing down quotes, but that essentially, like, the not self fear is the thing that we have to overcome in order to be deconditioned. And so it's important to know whether it's a self fear or not self fear, because it is the thing that's like standing in the way. And I can so easily see that for myself, because it always seems like the difficult thing for me is also the thing that I need to do in order to uh, essentially like follow my own strategy and authority. Like it's always that I have to make somebody else unhappy with me, or create a boundary where I'd really rather not have to assert anything, or be super picky about what it is that I'm eating and who it is that I'm eating with, or put all of these, fucking what seems like to the homogenized world to the normal world, right? Because the what is considered normal is homogenized. Like they're the same thing. So when you're doing stuff that is correct for you, it is immediately going to stand out like a sore thumb. And so there's all this fear that I have around that too, of just sticking out because I have to do it, and I have to do it for my body and for my own authority. So, it's been something that I've been thinking about a lot, is this concept of fear and the kind of the way that it informs your not self decision making at every turn. And like, how would I be making my decisions if that wasn't there? And honestly, I don't know, because I think this is a cellular transformation that I'm talking about here. I think letting go of the fear is not just like, oh, like having a really good meditation and suddenly you're free of all of this shit. It's like you have to slowly over time show yourself that you don't need to be afraid of the things that you're afraid of. And it's not even like you're showing it to yourself, it's just that life is showing it to you as you continue to decondition. And my body's still super scared. It's super scared all the time of all kinds of things that are probably not actually myself. Like my own like realistic fears, they're probably all rooted in my not self. It's a beast. The not self fear is a beast. It is a violent beast. I'm not even kidding. And maybe I feel like it's more violent because I'm defined emotionally, but I would assume that everyone's not self is a violent beast. So, a violent, fearful beast, willing to do just about anything to assuage its own fears. And I can see it when my head starts going, trying to get me to do things. My mind starts talking to me, trying to get me to do things that I know aren't correct for me, but will make me feel better in the moment because it's assuaging a fear. The mind is what Ra calls, and other systems too have called, like a petty tyrant. It is going to constantly poke you in the places that you're afraid, constantly, to get you to do the homogenized thing. It just will. And that's crazy, because that's not a small thing to come up against.
Yeah. What to do?
What to
Slowly
do?
decondition.
Well, slowly decondition is right. Slowly, like my thing is, I know my not self and myself, both parts of me, all of me are stubborn. So it's like I might take more than 7 years to decondition, but I'm also earnest as fuck. So this stuff, like, eventually it's gonna happen, one way or the other. But I mean, there's a lot of people, I think, too, in the community, especially in the projector community, whose like not self has convinced them that they're deconditioned because they've spent the amount of time that they need to decondition, but they're not deconditioned. It's their not self that's it's so funny.
I feel
It's
like
their
that's me.
not it's their not self wearing a deconditioned outfit, but it's still their not self. So, you have to be like brutally honest too with yourself in these moments, because maybe it takes longer, and I tell myself all the time, because I wake up with an abject horror, and I have a lot of fear, I have a lot of anxiety that lives in my solar plexus, and sometimes I tell myself that this sinking feeling is because of the mutation that's happening in the solar plexus. Sometimes I tell myself the sinking feeling is because of the SSRIs that I took on and off. Sometimes I tell myself that the sinking feeling is because I didn't eat right, or I'm not following my authority, or sometimes I tell myself that it's the bitterness that has accrued over years and years and years of not living correctly that I tried to numb out, and now it's just my whole life is sour because I'm highly aware. and I have not always been so aware. Um, I'll tell myself all kinds of different things as to why I feel like this, but the thing that really helps me is just me realizing, look, you have like 3 more years before you even touch what would be considered a 7-year cellular decondition process. Like, don't judge the process yet until you're there, and then start to really look at it and see where there's holes and things of that nature. But if you wake up and you're feeling not super stoked to be living in the life that you're in, and you haven't fully deconditioned yet, it's like, well, yeah, of course, what's new? Um, so that's kind of how I've been having to look at it, because I'm like, this is a period of time that if we were born into lives where we were able to live correctly from the jump, we would never have to go through. But this is like being a fucking baby. Of course, babies don't have resources. Like, we don't have anything because we're just figuring out how to walk. Like, we're just figuring out how to crawl, actually, as ourselves, not as a not self. And so there's going to be a lot of time where we're really reliant on people. And it's by the grace of whatever the F program is running this whole situation that we're in, that we've gotten the information and we have a situation where we can have some kind of containment while we're deconditioning. So I don't know. I think about my situation and my open G center, like you were talking about before, and how it doesn't, the place that I was in last didn't feel right to my open G center, and the place I'm in now does not feel completely right to my open G center. But it feels like the only place that I can be in right now. And it feels like if I tried to get out of this place right now, that I would find myself somehow in a similar situation. And I need to go through whatever the process here is in following my strategy and authority, even if it means having to have some difficult conversations, have some difficult um, relationships, have some people look at me weird or people question my behavior, or all of this stuff, like having to follow it in these circumstances, even though it's not like the chef's kiss perfect situation for me, because I think that being in the wrong place while you're deconditioning is part of the process, especially when there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah. It's one of the hard things about like deconditioning is fitting in with the normies, and when they question our strangeness as people who are living against the grain of normality, and then trying to get us to fit into the homogenized world and asking why are you the way that you are, like why aren't you doing this, why aren't you doing that, like it puts a lot of pressure and it's uncomfortable, and you have to cope with it in whatever way is correct for you. Like whether for Sarah that's creating the boundaries to not have to deal with those persistent beings who pester her, or being honest as a undefined solar plexus person, confronting when it's correct. Yeah, it's hard. It is difficult indeed.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you say that too, because I had this realization about like the avoiding confrontation and truth thing, and it made me think like I'd spent a lot of time thinking that lying was bad for your aura. This is like a Kundalini teaching. But now that I'm into human design and I understand mechanics a little bit better, what I realize is that, confrontation is not like it's not, and this is also probably because my design or my personality sun earth is in the 36-6. Um, Confrontation is only useful when it is productive and it leads to a different outcome. And for some people, they're never going to change. Um, and you can, it doesn't mean you give up on them and you never confront them or you never do anything and you never try and have a conversation that might change the way that they perceive things. But there's a quality of needing in the not self homogenized world when you're dealing with these beings. A lot of times those that you love, it's not like you don't like these people, but you just recognize that they're not living correctly as themselves. You have to know when it's time to confront something and when it's just more useful to just lie. Just lie about what it is that you're doing and why. And it's like there has to be, of course, you have to be honest about what your boundaries are, and in the sense that you need to just put them out there and be like, this is what I can and cannot do, right? This is what my authority, my body physically wants to do versus what it doesn't want to do. But the reasoning behind that, you can make up whatever reasoning you want that's going to get you to be able to actually honor your body, I think, personally. Um, because it's not like if I told somebody the entire background of human design that they would just click in and understand and get it, so it's like there's this quality that I've been thinking about too when it comes to not self and living in the upside down, and like what we are, like we're an interregnum, like not just because we're homo sapiens intransitus, right? We're moving from one type of being into another, but like where we are in time and what we're trying to accomplish is like we're not living in a world where people understand the foundations of what it means to be human and the mechanics of what it means to be human, but we're not completely in the seven-centered model either. And so we're in this mentally, this bridge, trying to figure out how to get across it so that we can be deconditioned. And it's like, I'm willing to throw out all the stops. I don't care what it takes. I don't care if I have to lie. I don't care if I have to sometimes uh, be withholding information from people because they're not going to understand me anyway. It's like when you ask me and you really come to me with like an inquisitive sense, like I'll give you whatever, and you invite me in to share my experience. Of course I'm going to. But if you haven't and I have to deal with you because you're a part of my life as I'm deconditioning, then I'm going to tell you what I need to tell you in order to get the outcome that I need to get, in order to stay true to myself while also creating the least amount of collateral damage. Um, a lot of it is mind. And I realized too that like a lot of it was mind for me trying to not lie to people for so long. Like, but why? Like, if my body's gonna lie about something, then I'm just gonna let it do that, and I'm not gonna make myself feel bad about it, because there's a lot of resistance that we face. We face resistance in the not self, being not self, and we face resistance as we're coming out of conditioning and trying to be ourselves. Either way, you're getting it. So it's just a matter of figuring out what's the most sustainable resistance over the course of your lifetime. And I think that trying to go towards the path of deconditioning and the resistance that you're going to face with that initially will lead to the least amount of resistance long term. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I agree. And to bring levity, it reminds me of our podcast motto, it's okay to be a dick sometimes. But but something that came to mind as you were talking was just the idea of confrontation as a whole, and how, well, one, like sometimes it's correct to be confrontational, but the way in which we enter into confrontation is often not self. It's often people being impulsive, emotionally defined people being impulsive and not waiting out their way to discern, is it correct to enter into confrontation or not? Or it's the not self emos amplifying and going balls to the walls, or avoiding confrontation altogether. But then I also thought most of what we confront about, it's not how we enter into confrontation that's not self, but it's also what we confront about is not self. So many
Mm.
confrontations that we have are about things that are not selves are involved in, and it's just the not self mind getting further trapped into its shenanigans by wanting to be confrontational or getting into confrontations, whether it wants to or not, about things that are just not self. It's funny, like imagine how much peace there would be if we truly only confronted about the things that were, one, like you said, productive or constructive, that bring solutions, or if we actually entered into those confrontations correctly, and if those confrontations were correct because they were about things that actually needed to be confronted. And not all the non-self stuff. It'd be crazy, but like maybe there would be a lot more confrontation. Who knows? Maybe that's just, ideology, or thinking about it in idealistic circumstances, to say we would be more peaceful.
Yeah.
Perhaps that.
Well, it's interesting too. I was thinking about this because there's all kinds of stuff on. I feel like, I don't know, maybe the projectors pages have been more active lately. I'm not exactly sure, but um, there was this realization that I had as an emotionally defined person, and that is that if I don't wait out my wave for decision making, then every confrontation that I get into as a result of the decision that I made from that wave not being weighted out in the beginning is going to be a not self confrontation. Like it's the concept that if you don't enter into something correctly, especially if you're emotional, then everything after that from soup to nuts becomes incorrect. And then as a projector, it comes down to, like, if you're stuck in the situation, how can I allow myself to be in awareness of this while I'm still stuck in it until I'm able to get out and then not make the same decision again. But it makes me think of all of the people who are emotional, who don't wait out their wave to make important decisions, like what relationship should I be in, where should I live, you know, all of the big, what job should I have, and then all the confrontations that they get into as a result of the wrong relationship, as a result of not waiting out the wave to get into the relationship, or as a result of not waiting out the wave to pick the right job. It's like all of that, and it is vast. I mean, if you're thinking about it in terms of that, the amount of not self confrontation that is out there because you're just living incorrectly, generally speaking, is vast, 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 vast. And it also makes me think that wherever I am now, because I am in a situation somewhat similar to Laura, where I am relying on other people for support. But it is the closest to correct that I could have possibly been in since the inception of my deconditioning process. Like, it is not 100% correct, but it is as correct as it gets with the options that I have from my immediate life that's right around me. And it's like I realize that there are confrontations in the situation that I am supposed to get into that are correct, even if they feel like shit. And maybe this is partially because I'm a 36, again, personality sun earth, 36 6 on my earth, on my personality earth. It's grounding me to get into these boundary talks, conversations around boundaries, and things of that nature, even if I hate it. Like, I really don't like doing it. And that's different than if I was living with my ex boyfriend who was incorrect for me, who I did not wait out my wave to get into a relationship with, and was fighting with him over boundaries that were just the most fruitless and unnecessary battles. So I'm just, thinking about, like Laura and I both said, but the productivity of confrontation and the essential understanding that there's going to be resistance along this path until we're able to lock into what is our very unique, correct, narrow path. We're going to face resistance everywhere else. So, there's a level of resistance that we just have to acknowledge and be all right with on this deconditioning journey until we get to our right path, because that's the only thing that protects us. So, I don't know. I've just talked in a circle, but
I just want to share, like, on the flip side, for us non-emotional people, when we enter into things incorrectly, I would say it's going to further perpetuate the not self tendency of the emotional solar plexus to avoid truth, to be an ostrich with its head in the sand, and to, like, be so, so, so afraid of confrontation. Like, confrontation's correct when we're invited into it, and then our own authority says yes as non-emotional people, which is rare to be invited into confrontation, and for your authority to say, like, yeah, you should be confrontational right now. Maybe if you're an undefined solar plexus person with your sun earth in your, whether it's design or personality side in the solar plexus, then like, yeah, maybe you're more inclined to be invited to be confrontational through your own strategy and authority. But yeah, I'm thinking for myself, like when I enter into when I enter into things incorrectly, there the intensity of avoiding confrontation and truth grows. And it's more prominent again because the not self theme is like a really bright light in a very dark room and it's just blaring, or it's like a siren going on saying like you need to confront but you're not gonna, because that's a scary business and you don't want to try that out, you don't want to do that. So yeah, it's interesting.
And to be fair, it is absolutely terrifying when you're dealing with confrontation with a not self emotional center.
Yeah, because we're
Like,
gonna distort that and blow it up, and
yeah.
it's yeah, it's not
Yeah,
fun.
it's not. I mean, it's the whole not self world is a mess. And I think about, again, like all of these confrontations I've gotten in with people. My whole life is about confrontation. It's about this conflict that can lead to a crisis, or crisis that leads to conflict. And something that Alok said to me that really resonated was that nobody knows you until they have had to come into a crisis or a conflict with you. And that just struck me as being so accurate, because it's like my whole life I have to constantly be checking in, as a projector and as a three bodies, a design body, which Ra had said was like it's like it tunes into other people. Open G center projector, three body. I'm just talking to people and I tune into their frequency and I can easily lose myself. 58.6. Okay, that's another thing. I'm not going to get into that, but I can easily lose myself in the other person. And so I have to constantly be making these, what's the word? I have to be constantly checking in on my own boundaries. I have to be setting them. I have to be negotiating them. I have to be renegotiating them, because it's like I can go so far into the other person that makes the other person feel really good, because I'm really capable of really tuning in to what their uniqueness is, that I can cross my own boundaries without realizing it, or I have my whole life at least cross those boundaries of myself, in order to tune into the frequency of the other person, in order to get locked in. And it's just naturally what my body does. And so then I have to back up and say, wait, wait, wait. I really like you. Like, you matter a lot to me, but like, this is me and that's you. Like, this is where I end and this is where you begin. Okay. So we have to have that conversation a lot with everyone in my life. And um, I appreciate the people, and I always notice the people who just have this and as an inherent part of them. That's not who I am. Who I am is kind of more amorphous, and I'm able to take the shape of whatever glass I'm put in, but then I'm also required to constantly be checking in with my own authority in order to see if we're still working with it, or if we've left ourselves, abandoned ourselves in order to go play in somebody else's movie, play a role in somebody else's movie, which in some cases is correct. But, it's like this constant dance that I'm doing, not just with generators, but with everyone. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, it's funny. I did not think we were going to talk about conflict and confrontation and emotional centers this much, but it's, it's interesting, because as someone who is emotional, you think that I'm always confrontational. And in a sense, with the people that I have been intimate with, I really can be deeply confrontational and scary. But with other people, I will be avoidant. I will be avoidant. So I understand that side. I understand the desire to avoid things that probably need to be said. Um, the thing that I'm realizing too, it's like, as an emotional person, if I'm emotionally activated by something or someone, or I'm triggered in any way, shape, or form, it's not time to have the confrontation. And I guess this is where my needing to lie about things comes in sometimes, because it's like, if I'm not ready to have the confrontation because I'm emotionally activated, and yet something needs to be asserted to someone because they are trying to bark up my tree when I'm not ready to talk about things, I have to have something to kind of hold them off with, whatever it is, if they don't understand that I'm emotional, because only a handful of people in my life truly understand that. It's getting to the point where everyone in my life that I really connect with regularly does understand that. But of course, there's people all over the place. You know, my dad, my mom, my sister, there's all kinds of people who don't get it. And so there's these moments where I know I need to have a confrontation. I'm not ready to have a confrontation. They want me to have a confrontation with them. I'm not ready. And so I just have to blow them off, lie, say something, do whatever I have to do in order to not have that confrontation when I'm still activated. So there's a lot of nuance here. For each individual, each like process is going to look so unique to them. And it's going to be such a reflection. You know, the thing that I feel like astrology and human design, or that is true in astrology, that I feel like human design people who are like a bit dogmatic don't fully get, is that everything is holographic and everything is still reflecting you back to you. Like wherever you are in your process internally is also where you're at your process externally. You know, these things are all, there's like a big, deep connection to everything. And your process to decondition, to individuate, is as unique as you are. My process to decondition, individuate, it's going to require different things of me than it requires of Laura, and on and on and on. So I just think that's an important thing to kind of let people know about.
Yeah, it makes me think of how much I've lost touch with that magical quality of life. The more I've deconditioned, I've just become dark and bleary-eyed about the reality of existence, not so much embracing the reflective nature of as within, so without, and how we are a microcosm of the entirety of the macrocosm.
Yes. I could say some things, Laura, but I feel like I've been blabbering a lot.
Well,
Go ahead.
how are you feeling?
Well, no, I mean, I guess the last thing I'll just say on that is that, I see it in my work, who I work with, how I work. Like, I see the 40-37, and I see the disintegration of that coming, even though it hasn't fully locked in yet. I can see it happening in the micro and in the macro. And so just to reiterate what Laura just said of these two things being there. As far as I'm feeling, I mean, I had a bunch of things happen to me this week, but I don't feel like specifically resonant with any of them right now to talk about. Is there anything that you want to, or how are you feeling? Is there anything that you want to riff on from your week that you didn't get to touch on yet?
Yeah, there's things in my little notes that I could
All
still
right,
touch
let's
on.
see. Let's see what's in there.
Two themes, much more lighter than like digging into the truth about confrontation and crisis. One is the ego center, in terms of like, I was thinking about, I don't know how this thought came to my mind, but I was thinking about all the times that I've tried to audition for something to prove myself and how it didn't go well. Like I didn't make the team, or I didn't get what I wanted. Um, I was a theater kid and a dance kid and a choir kid. And so in middle school, I was in choir because it was just a class. You didn't have to audition. So it's like you're allowed to sing because you're allowed to sing. Even if you suck, which I did, you're allowed to do it. Also in middle school, I tried out for the musical and I got it because they're like, we're not going to say no. You can just be kid number 16, which I was in the Music Man, which was fine. Like my friend was a theater kid, and so she's the one that I guess invited me to audition with her. But again, I don't know if it was a proper audition. I don't remember back then, but I auditioned with her. And again, like my singing skills were not great. So I I was just kid number 16 or whatever. And then in high school, again, I did theater all 4 years, but I I had a teacher the first 3 years who had her favorites, and she would only recognize her favorites. And so if you were not one of her favorite students, you wouldn't get any parts in any of the plays. And her name was aptly Miss Hater. she she hated on us, which makes me think of your last name, Sarah being Burns, like Sarah Burns. She burns in this lifetime. Um,
Fun time.
with your passionate solar plexus. But anyways, I would end up just doing the set. Like I was helping people change in and out of costumes, and I would change the set in between the scenes because they would never get roles. Also in high school, I auditioned for the dance team and I didn't make it. And so apparently at some point in my life, I gave up on auditioning for things. But in college is when I started ballet. And I was invited to participate and perform in like the dance program's Nutcracker. It wasn't the full Nutcracker, but like they did part of it. And like one of the students, I think, like came up to me and was like, "We want you to dance with us." And I was like, "Okie dokie." And I got to perform and like be a participant and like have not quite a solo, but like a trio with some other dancers. And I felt like I was properly recognized because I didn't audition. They just invited me to do it. And it was really nice and successful. And I felt really good about myself, even though my skills as a dancer were, again, not great. Much better today than they were back then. Um, Anywho, I was just thinking about that and thinking about the ego center and proving ourselves and how perhaps with strategy and authority, even if you're correctly invited, like I was in that musical in middle school, um, it didn't, I guess I was part of it. I wasn't on the set. I was actually a character in the musical, though I had no lines. At least I was able to participate. Whereas in high school, I was not given that chance whatsoever. Um, so that was one of the themes I was thinking about. Is there anything you want to say about it, Sarah?
Yeah, it's funny. I like this is where I'm like, I may have been more correct for a lot longer than I thought. I really did not. I don't think that I auditioned for anything.
Were you a theater kid
Um,
though?
no,
Or like sports
I
teams?
I did some sports. I was like, I was kind of like I would say I was like a well accepted loner. In fifth grade, I was invited to do an Annie like dance thing for the talent show, which I just did because I was invited. But I wasn't the mastermind behind it, and I just kind of followed the leader in that particular instance. But I will say there was one thing that was horrific for me, and that was when we were supposed to be, this is not self ego stuff, trying out or rushing for a sorority. Laura, were you in a
I
sorority?
was not. I
Yeah,
can
no,
assume, like, guess the horrors that entail.
the horrors, the horrors, the horrors, the horrors. Well, it was just because, first of all, basically I was living with all generators. And so they have a different system. And so they all wanted to, rush. And I felt like, oh, okay, like I'll do it. Didn't follow my emotional authority, should have. Wasn't following it in any way, shape, form, or fashion at this point. My 20s were basically all not self. There's not really any remnant that I can pull from my 20s that had anything to do with who it is that I actually am. But besides the point, went to Rush. And like, this is when also my skin was at its worst. My acne was really bad, and not the only sorority that wanted to take me, which was like the most just like nerdy losery sorority that's what everybody thought it was. And I just remember crying in the basement because my friends had gotten into like the quote unquote cool sororities and had gotten picked by whomever. And I was just like, I was like, I'm not joining that sorority, and I'm not interested in sororities ever again. So yeah, it was the one that was probably enough for me to never try out for anything ever again. I had kind of, I was homeschooled growing up, so I was super sheltered, which is probably good for my cave self. And then when I went into school, I was in a super small Christian school, which is probably also good for my cave self. And then when I went into middle school and high school, I was so overwhelmed by the number of people that were there that I really just was trying to just be okay. And like that was basically, it started with me getting really good grades and then ended with me just doing a lot of drugs and drinking all the time. But it was never a focus of mine to like be a part of any extracurriculars in high school. And I guess it, in a sense, of course there's many different, I think the not self can go down a lot of different types of, get itself in a lot of different types of situations. I think I could have gone into that kind of behavior, but I was dealing with other not self things and themes at that time. Um, and that also might be because I'm split. It wasn't like the centers were as important to me as the individual people who are bridging splits for me. Um, so yeah.
It makes me think that perhaps it's good that you weren't accepted because as a non-tribal person, you're not cut for the cloth. You're not cut for
No,
the sorority cloth. So
no, no. Well, and it was just so like, it's, it's, it's interesting, and I was thinking about this too. It's like your not self wants to be included and wants to be a part of things so bad that it hurts your not self so bad when you get discluded or
yeah,
you're not picked or whatever. But both things, you know, are not self. So fuck it.
makes me think about studying abroad, but that's a whole other tangent. I don't know if I want to go down that rabbit hole or not. Just like the shenanigans that were very not self over there and the misery and
Oh, well,
so
we could touch on it for a second. Totally going over there, it was not self for me. Wasn't invited, initiated, went over there, was a shit show.
yeah.
Um,
Well, for me, I studied abroad in Paris, and I've been to Paris before I studied abroad. And the first time I went there, I got physically sick. Like, my body was like, let's get out of this place. This place isn't good for you. And then speaking French, I was like, where should I study abroad? I guess it'll be France. Went there, and it was horrible. Horrible.
yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
men I don't did I menstruate? I don't think I menstruated the entire time, or was it after? I don't remember. It was
Jeez.
probably after. Actually, no, it was later. Was it? I don't even remember anymore. I'll have to think
Wow.
back on it. But like my body wasn't happy. I gained 30 pounds
Oh
in
my
like the
God.
4 months that I was there. But like to be honest, I was eating baguettes and cheese and Napoleons like the entire time because I knew I'd only be there once. I wasn't ever gonna plan on living there. So I was gonna enjoy it. Even though I was exercising and moving my body a lot, still nope, gained 30 pounds, and that was fun. Having to buy new clothes in a country that fat shames. What a hoot. And I have giant calves, um just naturally, and like they gained weight, and like I couldn't wear boots, like none of the boots in any of like I'm tall, so I have big feet, so already I don't fit in because French people are physically more petite and small. So like having to buy shoes over there, one, like them having my size was a big deal, and then them having my size and actually fit my calves was like I could not fit my feet into shoes there. It
Mm.
was difficult, and like my shoes fell apart, the ones that I had, because I was walking more than I was before, and I needed shoes, and yeah, it was a disaster. Anyways.
Yeah, yeah. Mine was, I'm not going to get into it because it's honestly unsettling, but mine was equally a disaster, to be sure. And it just, yeah, I mean, this is what happened. Like, your body is not protected when you are taking it out of your own, essentially, when you're leaving your own path and your own correctness.
Yeah.
Like, things just start going haywire, and I can completely relate. Although mine was more like I got scabies and bed bugs, but
Oh
which
wow.
I'm not gonna not gonna go down that rabbit hole. Was there something else that you had in your notes that you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, it is the happiest of the lot, so we'll finish on a happy note. I was just
Nice.
thinking about projector success that I've had, that they're just like floating through my mind. And so I wanted to share them because I think I mentioned it the very first episode, and then I was like, I'll cover this another time. But I talked last week about a previous mentor that I worked with. So that was sort of initiating. And so here we go back to that theme of how do you enter into the right trajectory to reach the right forces when you have to be invited. And so here's a situation in which I did initiate, but then it led me to the correct resources and opportunities and all that. So story time. Again, I mentioned this previous mentor that I worked with, and the way I started working with her was I was following way too many people on Instagram. So I was sorting through people to get rid of that I follow to clean out my feed, and I saw that I followed this woman, and I was like, I have no idea who she is. And so like for every person, I would click on their profile and see what my spleen had to say about their essence and whether it wanted to continue following them or not. And so I continued to follow her. And then I noticed that she would pop up my Instagram feed and have certain offerings. And so my body just really wanted to work with her. Probably not self themes of proving yourself or improving yourself, but still I started working with her. And in working with her, I became connected with her other clients and that community. And one of her other clients invited me into dream weaving, which was a monetary community. What was it? Gift economy. It was a gift economy that on the outside looks like an MLM, but on the inside it's not structured to be an MLM, but it requires inviting people into the community to like gift one another money. And I was invited and my spleen said yes. Like at this point I had already begun experimenting with human design, and I was listening to my spleen, and my spleen said yes. And so I just jumped in without thinking about it and just was like, okie dokie, I guess we're doing this. And then entering into that community led to meeting other people and having to do certain things, jump through certain hoops, invite people, et cetera, make connections. Anyways, I made a connection with this human being, this woman that I would have otherwise never interacted with. And we became friends, and we would talk, and we ended up participating in the community together because you have like little micro communities within the macro community. And we became good friends, and we would talk about deep theoretical and philosophical things about God, about religion. So many great conversations. And she was studying fertility awareness for the fertility awareness method of using the natural cycles of the body to prevent contraception. And she invited me to be a student. And so she asked me if I wanted to learn what she was teaching because she needed to have a certain amount of practicum students for her to get her certification. And so I said yes. And in that process, I got to learn something that I had previously had interest in. I was already for several years having a very emotional and spiritual and energetic magical woo-woo connection with my cycles, but I lacked the scientific, practical, mundane reality version of that connection. And she taught it to me. And she recognized me as a student with a defined head of being able to ask questions that could then therefore allow her to better present her teaching materials. I would fill in the gaps with my questions to see what was missing or how to portray things in certain ways. And so I was able to guide her as her being a generator and doing this, as her student being invited to study this under her. And then I also gained this tremendous wisdom that I would have never otherwise been inclined to study myself, that I had no idea existed. That I tell Sarah about all the time. I'm always talking about what my hormones are doing every single day. But it's this tremendous wisdom that we as human beings in our modern day society don't learn. Like we're put into biology class or like health class occasionally through the years of high school, but we don't retain the information, and we're not taught the information at such an intricate level that actually allows us to be empowered with what we know, to be able to understand our bodies and not put shit in them, and to know what our body needs, when it needs it, and what our body is telling us about what's happening to it based on the physiological symptoms that it has day to day. Like there's so much magic and wisdom in it. And it's just something that is sadly not known collectively because we're not taught it. And I feel like it would save women a lot of sanity and patience and just stress to know this stuff, to like not question what's going on with our own bodies. For the ladies out there, sorry gents, but it's just tremendous knowledge and I use it every single day of my life now, and I'm so grateful that I was invited down that deep twisted path of like jumping through different hoops and having to do different things to be able to know what I know now. And it wouldn't have happened. And like I use this information and tell other people about it upon invitation, and have projector success, sharing what I know when it's appropriate, because I'm not just telling people about their menstrual cycles willy-nilly when it's uninvited usually, but it's led to projector success, and it wouldn't have happened if I didn't initiate, because I would have never met the people that I met had I not initiated. So yeah, it's interesting how the world works sometimes.
Yeah, well, and I think this is where we have to again understand how like unique and individual our process is. Like that doesn't mean don't follow strategy and authority, but actually this whole anecdote reminds me of a post that I saw that a human design girl who I can't pronounce her name, Pragya Beniwal, posted, and she basically gave a new conceptualizing of the centers that we have defined, and like because all of our centers are defined through different planetary uh, combinations, um, there's something to be said about definition and what it means as far as who it is that we are, right? Like our projectorness and things like that. And kind of the limits of trying to fit each person into a like basically into one out of four ways of being. I feel like strategy and authority first and foremost is something that tells you to listen to your fucking body. Listen to your body, right? That's the first thing that I feel like strategy and authority is for. Um, and I think initiating when we're doing it incorrectly, and this also just speaks to the fact that like while we're in this not self upside down place where we're in limbo, where we're starting to pop our heads out of the sky, but we haven't figured out how to live our lives truly as ourselves in a way that is coherent and resistance free, or as close to resistance free with the outside world. Like while we're in this place, there's like certain things that we just have to figure out by maybe doing things that seem to be counterintuitive, like you were saying, initiating in this particular circumstance. But it was kind of brought on by a splenic hit, and then another splenic hit that came from a physical body hit that came from something. Perhaps it was your not self wanting to self improve, or maybe it was your spleen just knowing what the future was before it happened. I can't say, I can't tell you what is what. I know that nobody invited me to study astrology, and if I hadn't studied, I got so much recognition from studying astrology, and at first maybe it wasn't the correct kind of recognition, but I got put into contact with forces that ultimately connected me with Laura and also connected me with human design. And so there's something to be said about, you know, and allowing your body to do what it wants, even if that looks like initiating sometimes. And the post that she had was basically fill in your blanks differently. So um, fill in your particular definition in this way. It says, I am input your profile here, of input your incarnation cross, upon input whatever your specific strategy is, and then your pathway has to do with your the definition that you have. So for example, I would be, I am a investigative martyr, that's my profile, of Eden, because that's what my cross is, upon invitation. So this is what I do upon invitation, right? I'm an investigator, martyr of Eden upon invitation, and my pathway is abstract. And I feel like that gives you a lot more freedom than thinking I'm a projector and so this is the only path that I have. Like for Laura, what's the name of your cross again?
Identification.
So yeah, I am a heretical investigator of identification upon invitation. And my pathway is, I mean, yours would be abstract and logical because you have both. But that's kind of like the concept. And I was just thinking about, you know, it's very heretical to be talking about women's menstrual cycles in terms of what is not, common knowledge, and how it can stop you from having to do all of these things that, this birth control that we've been put on, fucking condoms, this, that, and the other, you know, and being being, someone who can, like, upon invitation, guide other people towards this behavior. Like, it feels very on point for you. Now, there's a lot to be said about, all of the dynamics that are at work here, and um the concept of initiating, right? And what that means and what that looks like, and when it's a no-no. I think the number one thing is you will know it's a no-no. Your body's going to know it's a no-no when you're doing it wrong. And so, it's like your body comes first before anything else. What's correct for your body comes first before anything else. And everyone is so unique that trying to follow a cookie cutter plan on how you're going to follow strategy and authority is going to take you so far and no further. So I just want to put that out there because I like that you just took us on that journey of your own success and where it's felt meaningful and how it came to pass that you were even able to get this information in your noggin. Because it made me think of the same thing. And I hope that any projectors that are listening are also thinking about their paths to success and what the beginning of that looked like for them.
Yeah, it's important to notice the successes as much as the bitterness. But I just wanted to add, good points, but I just wanted to add, let's see if I remember. Initiating never comes from the mind. I think that's the key takeaway. Like sometimes the body will initiate and it's correct, because it's the body that's doing it. If we think about manifestors initiating, they're initiating from a motor center to the throat. It's not the mind to the throat trying to have an idea or conceptualize something and act upon that idea or concept. There we go, conceptuality, that concept. No, initiation comes from the body. And sometimes that is from the not self. Like my body has no motors defined. And so when my root center is active, that's often me trying to get free of pressure, or me trying to prove myself, or me avoiding confrontation or truth, or me, whatever the fourth one is, I don't remember, sacral, not knowing what enough is enough, and just being caught up in the sacral monkey wheel, hamster wheel, whatever it's called. But sometimes, like you said, it was a splenic thing that the body will do something. Do without doing, and the doing gets done, Rob would say. And like it's hard as a motorless projector to be like, does it though? Does it really get done? Because it really doesn't. But sometimes the body will act on its own, and you have to trust that. And as a splenic person, I've been given permission to trust that, whereas not everyone, and have been an intuitive person all my life, basically have been given permission to trust that. And Even though like I have acted from my mind plenty of times, like I've been aware that I have an intuition and it's there for a reason. But again, I think I said last time, um, or maybe I said this just to Sarah. I was telling someone about human design and I described it in such a way that it's like, so you don't have to make decisions with your mind. And this person said, why would you do that? We're so homogenized to believe that the mind is where we make our decisions. And we can have fun with that. Go for it if you really want to and have a ball. But that's not what human design is about. Anyways, yeah, just wanted to bring that little tidbit of
Yeah.
manifestor initiating. It's not manifestors deciding with their mind that they're going to initiate, it's their body doing it for them.
And I think part of like, you come to human design with your mind. And in a sense, you kind of have to use your mind at first because it's like the training wheels on your body. You're trying to figure out how to actually listen to your body, and you have to figure it out in your mind until it clicks. And then it just becomes natural. But it's a really important distinction of that initiating, like allowing your body to do what your body does, right? Like my body studies astrology. I never forced myself to do that. I couldn't force myself to do that if I tried. It just is what happened, what my body wanted to absorb. And, this is where it took me. But, the mind is definitely where things start getting, basically just all warbled and distorted. And so it's kind of like it is a situation of so far and no further, which is something that Ross says a lot. It's like, this is as far as you can go with your mind, and then with the knowledge, and then the rest has to be an embodied understanding. So I think this was I'm glad that there's plenty of things to be said about projector success, right? That we'll continue talking about as time wears on. But I think this was a good kind of completion of the episode, unless there's anything else that you want to
No,
add.
that was the end of my notes. No more.
Okay. Okay. No, so far, no further. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for sticking around. If you did, we are on Instagram at Projector Stories, and would love to hear from you if you are following along with our conversation. And it's correct. Otherwise, we will see you, hear you. You will hear us next time.
Catch you on the flip side.
Bye.